name is Lisa. Welcome to One Lisa Show. Money Penny is on my side and squeaking her toy, so we may hear interruptions throughout this. I am wearing the Frankie tee by Tilly and the Buttons that is found in the Stretch book. This is one of my older makes, but it's a beautiful day here in Indiana, and it is just cool enough for August that I can wear this long sleeve shirt today while I am catching up with some odds and ends around the house and having some sewing time. Today is all about this or that, sewing edition. This or that is going around, and I have been tagged by a few people, including Sarah from Naughty Gnome Crafts and Zelda from Zelda Sews. This or that sewing edition started with the Love to Sew podcast, and then Juliana from the Curated Curvy, tongue twister for me, started this hashtag and tagging people on their this or that with sewing questions. So follow along if you've been watching others. The this or that sewing edition questions, they're tough. I'm going to say they're tough because I cannot answer one of them, I think, like with a definite yes or a definite no, this or that. There's a gray in between all of them. Let me start with topic 1, which is called sewing prep. And number 1 is sewing new versus stash busting. And this year so far, it has been stash busting. When I first started sewing heavily during COVID, I didn't have a lot of fabric, so I had to buy fabric, and I accumulated a stash. And this year I had been working not just on my stash, but on the scraps. And I keep a notebook where I mark down where I got the fabric on every project I've made, and I also notate if it was a scrap buster. So that was just beyond my stash. It was also scraps that I pieced together, and I've been doing a lot of that this year and enjoying it, and I like the creativity with that. I like trying to get a little bit more bang for my buck, and I don't want things to go to waste so much. And there's plenty of times where I make something and it's not anything of what I want, and I rip it all apart anyway. So I've been trying to even use those pieces. Number 2, PDFs versus paper patterns. PDFs, Michelle from Michelle Sews Again did put in her video that she questioned if this was meant to be more of indie versus big 4. I disagree with that because I think a lot of the indie or the big I disagree with that because a lot of the big 4 patterns, you can also buy them online in PDF version, and some people just don't want to wait for shipping. So they'd rather just print it and put it together and sew there. I do both. So here's where we're going to start talking. I do both. I do prefer PDF patterns more, with the caveat I hate taping and gluing those PDF pages together. I only like the PDF patterns if they come in the copy shop or the A0 version, because my boyfriend Big Daddy has a printer at his work where he can print me the nice big sheets, and that leads to number 3, cutting or tracing. Most of the time I trace. I will say, again, there's caveats to that. If it is a big 4 pattern like Simplicity or McCall's, I do cut. If I love the pattern, I go back and buy a second one of the same and leave it uncut in case size changes or I want to make it again. And there are a handful of patterns that are Simplicity and McCall patterns that I have purchased multiple copies of for that reason, and they are patterns I love and I know I'm going to continue to make, so I want to make sure there's a really good copy, but at the same time I do cut those because they're so cheap for us in the US when they're on sale at Joann's for like $1.99. So I would rather buy 2 of them and cut 1. Otherwise I do tend to trace, and especially even the big PDFs that Big Daddy gives me. They're nice and big, and sometimes I do cut those, but most of the time I trace. And the reason why is because I don't want to ask him continuously to print me another one out. If it is an item I'm probably going to make it only the one time, or I'm 100% sure on my size with that brand, I will cut it. Number 4, muslin or just go for it. I always want to do a muslin, but I tend to just go for it. Topic number 2 is fabric. This should be exciting. Number 1, in-store versus online shopping. For me, it's mostly online shopping. I do, like other Americans, we buy fabric from Joann's, and we're always upset with the quality of the fabric for the price. I'm sure there's plenty of you overseas that come to the States and you're like, oh, there's Joann's, and you're so in love with it, and it isn't bad, it's just not amazing. There is a quilt shop by my house that I really enjoy going to, so in that case I like to go buy in person and shop in person, and she even has an online store, but for me, I love feeling the fabric. I will say I do love buying online as well, and my favorite places to shop for fabric online are Minerva and Beyond the Pink Door. Number 2, knits or wovens. I like both. I like both equally. I'll make a bunch of wovens together, I'll make a bunch of knits together, and most of that is just because the needle's already in the machine. I like them both. I like them both equally. I can't pick one or the other because they all have their own reasons behind why I like them. Number 3, tumble dry or hang to dry. When it comes to my fabric, I always tumble dry. When I'm pre-washing, I always tumble dry, and then after the item has been made, it depends on the fabric. Most fabric I just throw in the wash and then in the dryer, but there are plenty of items, like some of my more precious fabrics that I've made something with, I do tend to hang dry those. Number 4, rotary cutter versus scissors. This is one I can actually answer fully. Rotary cutter all day long. I love my rotary cutter. I've had it for probably 20 some years. New blades work great. I can tell you I bought that rotary cutter when I wasn't really sewing. I was just buying fabric when I was in college, little scraps of fabric, and I was covering notebooks. And I would go to Walmart and I'd buy fabric, and I thought I could get a really straight line. They had this new thing out called a rotary cutter, and I fell in love with it. Mine is Fiskars, and it probably cost me $20 back then, which felt like a lot as a college student. I love it. Topic 3, clothing construction. Number 1, follow the pattern or wing it. This one I can also answer, so I'm really proud of myself. I follow the pattern. There are very few instances where I wing it. Even on a t-shirt pattern that is the super simple construction, I follow the pattern. After I've made it a handful of times, I don't need to look at the pattern anymore, but that's usually what I do. Number 2, bias tape versus facings. I think each have their own place. I don't always like the flap of the facing. I don't always like it flapping up, but understitching does wonders, and going along the seam to top stitch it down I think looks really sharp. I don't particularly care for when people sew their facings in and you can see the visible line unless that's a detail that's meant to be there. And bias tape, I make my own bias tape with my scraps. I do use it. There are many things I like the bias tape finish, like a curved hem, but I still struggle with the neckline and the arm holes on some garments, so for that reason I do like the facings. That's a tough one to answer for me. Number 4, button fly versus zip fly. I like a button fly. I like making the button fly over the zip fly just because I think some of it might be my machine and some of it is just the inexperience. I have a hard time with zippers. Number 5, button by hand or by sewing machine. Here's one I can absolutely answer. I don't know how to use the sewing machine function for buttons. I know mine has the function for it. I don't know how to use it and I don't want to. I'm okay with sewing my buttons on by hand. I might be the minority on that. Number 6, Fusible versus sewn in interfacing. I'm sure there's a time and a place for sewn in interfacing. I have some sewn in interfacing that I bought by accident once and have not gotten rid of it. I would love to use it, but I use fusible. Number 7, snip as you go or all at once. When I'm constructing something, I do pretty much snip as I go. When I get towards the end and I'm antsy, I might decide the last couple of steps to snip all at once, but for the most part, I get annoyed by all those little tiny threads everywhere, so I do tend to snip as I go. And number 8, press as you go or all at once. I can answer this one. Press as you go. I press as I go. I don't like pressing it all at once because then I usually get things, the seams will be folded in the wrong direction, or I mess up on a seam and a hem, and I know it's because I didn't press it in place. And finally, topic number 4 is your sewing habits. Late night seamstress versus daytime seamstress. I am a daytime sewer. I go to bed pretty early, and I always tell my big daddy, if I wake up in the middle of the night and can't fall back asleep, I will get up and go sew. I never do. Number 2, slow and steady versus frantic sewing. Most of the time it is slow and steady. If it takes me a week to make something or 2 weeks to make something, it is what it is. I like to get in some sewing every day, and for the most part I can, but not every day do I. And I don't like to stress myself out with time constraints and say I have to accomplish one thing a week. I have goals, but I don't like to give myself hard deadlines because it's a hobby and I enjoy it, and the moment I stop enjoying it, I won't do it anymore. Finally, the last one is tidy as you go or one big cleaning session. There's yes and yes. I do tend to tidy as I go on the desk I'm sewing on and the cutting table. And then there's one big cleaning session when probably once every 2 months. It's disgustingly embarrassing. It's not enough. I vacuum the floor, which I'm in the attic, is where I mostly sew. So it's an unfinished floor, and I tend to vacuum that like every couple of months, all the little bits, but I do pick up scraps. So I do tend to clean as I go, with the exception of the floor, and sometimes the stash gets messy, and that is also every couple of months. But the actual area where I will be doing my work, that needs to be clean. And that is my this or that sewing edition answers. Thank you to Love to Sew podcast and the Curated Curvy for bringing this out and making it something interactive and fun, and a way for all of us to get to learn a little bit more about each other's sewing habits. And thank you to Zelda from Zelda Sews and Sarah from Naughty Gnome, and anybody else I missed that may have tagged me to do this. I'm going to put a couple of tags, and I have not been on watching videos for a couple of weeks because I've been so busy working, so I'm behind on everybody else's this or that videos. So if I've tagged you and you've already done one, I'm probably going to watch it later today, and apologies for that. Thank you for watching. If you found this interesting and a weird look into my sewing habits, please give me a thumbs up, a like, a comment, and consider subscribing if you haven't done so already. Have a great day, and I hope you get a chance to do something creative in your neck of the woods. Thank you.